Welcome to Piggy Power. Today, drop link, enter bar link, whatever you'd like to call it, on a 206. Well yes, hello there. So today I'm going to show you how to do the drop link or anti-roll bar link on a Peugeot 206. As far as I can see, they are all the same on all the Peugeot 206s, so that's quite useful. I have done a guide on a Peugeot 406, but I thought I'd just do this as it has been requested, and that's how this channel works. You ask me to do something, and I might do it. Let me show you what we're going to need. So other than the items you'll need to remove your wheel, jack your car up, put it on a stand, etc., just to get access, a few things that you'll definitely need. You'll need, likely, a 17mm spanner or socket and wrench to take off the nuts on your anti-roll bar. You'll also need, quite possibly, Allen key set to hold the actual centre thread while you undo the nut. It's useful if you have wire brush, wire wheel on a drill, and obviously some WD-40 to help clean up the joint beforehand. A cheat socket and a gun will make things easier, but not be guaranteed of an easy job. Some vice grips or mole grips, also pretty essential to these. The joints usually always spin. And then a bar of some sort, could be any type of bar, so you can leave it down the anti-roll bar to ensure that you can get the joint off and the anti-roll bar link off without snapping your face off. You want to be a pro and open your packaging with a knife. You'll need a knife, and of course, a new anti-roll bar. Make sure you get the right one before you take everything apart. Right, let's do the job. Okay, and you're back in the room. So what we're going to do is, as you can see, this is the back of the joint, the top and the bottom. If I just get you in a little bit closer, you can just see the bottom joint. So on this car, both joints face in the same direction. Some are in opposite directions, but 206 is in the same. So I'm going to rotate the hub and assembly the other direction so I can get clearly the other side of this joint. I'm going to do that just by turning the steering wheel. This job can just take 5-10 minutes. It can take longer to get the car up on axle stands than do the job if the joint isn't all seized and rusted. Now, if you only just fitted one, you're just removing it, or it's just had one fitted because you're doing something else, that's great. But in this case, this is an old one, so it's been on here for billions of years. So it's pretty old crusty up in here. So what you'd want to do is get your wire brush or a little wire wheel on a drill, cheat mode. So I'm going to do now, and try and clean up those threads as much as possible. This is really going to help. Let that soak. Now, while that's going on, I'm just going to do the bottom one. Okay, so this is our bottom joint here. Going to do the same thing, clean up the threads. Now if you've got the time, let that soak. Use some penetrating oil of some sort, let it soak for 5-10 minutes. Anything beyond that, I find they don't have much success. I do have the pleasure here of these not being too bad. I'd also sprayed these earlier today, which also helps obviously with this demonstration, but they're not actually the worst I've ever seen. If your joint is completely gone and knocking up and down, which an anti-roll bar link, just to cover this, is probably the most likely joint to cause a knocking noise on a front-wheel drive vehicle. That is a sweeping statement, but it's the first place you'd look for knocking over bumps. So if this joint is completely gone, it's going to spin no matter what you do. So you want to get this nut off there. Now I've got a 17mm ratchet spanner. Now, it is really tight, so you might have to crack it off first with a nut and a nice big breaker bar. Now I've got cheat mode here, but it might not work very well. So what I'm going to show you is how you'd have to do this in an alternative method. So you could crack it off, get it moving, but what you're going to find is the joint, which is connected to the centre shaft here, is going to spin. There's not enough grip in that joint to hold it while you undo that nut. So as you notice in the middle, there is either a Torx or an Allen key slot. Now the problem with both of those is that they spin very, very easily. So it's likely that it'll just round off or break your socket. We're going to give it a go though and see how we get on. There is an alternative method. Right, that's started to turn, and if you can see carefully, the shaft is also turning, which means the joint is turning. So there's a couple of methods we can use here. We can stick our Allen key, or as if it's Torx, you could stick a Torx in, but it's likely it would definitely snap a Torx, and hold it, which it is working currently, to undo the nut. I'm having to use quite a lot of tension though. Now this is fine if you're going to try and reuse the drop link. If you're replacing it because it's broken basically, because it's defunct, then the other method is to get your grips, which you mentioned earlier, and grip the joint from behind. So you don't care about the rubber boot, you don't care about the joint, so we're going to get some grips in behind and get a grip on this now. So just adjust the grips just right until I've got a grip on it. There we go. And then I can ratchet away with whatever you've got. You might have to do just a normal spanner, or you might have a socket or a gun. I'm just going to keep that ratchet, bit of pressure towards the joint, just to keep the ratchet on there. And what happens, you see, is obviously if the threads are all chewed up from rust and salt and all that, the thread won't run down on the nut, or the nylock on the end, because these all should have nylock nuts on. Olden days had split pins and holes, which were even more of a pig. There we go. And that's off. So discard that. The new one will come with new nuts. Look, has a new nut on the top. And then we're going to get a little bar. I'm going to put the bar, we can actually take this off so you can see what's going on. Okay. I'm going to put the bar on top of the anti-roll bar, and then underneath the chassis somewhere, the subframe. I'm going to lever down, and that will release the anti-roll bar link, because there's tension on the anti-roll bar link, so we're just going to release a little bit of that tension and pull the link out and relax that tension. There we go. So now we're going to go up to the top one. Now if you're using this as a general reference guide for anti-roll bar links, that's fine too. Now you notice it's got a nylon nut and it's got the little Allen key slot in the middle. But you might find that about here, here is actually a slot to put a spanner on, which is quite useful because you're trying to grip through this rubber boot here onto the joint to stop the shaft spinning. Because no doubt, if it's all rusty and corroded, then you won't be able to get an Allen key in there, and if you do, it'll just spin around and then you'll be in all sorts of trouble. You could of course cut them off, but that could cause damage to brake lines and the suspension components, so we try and avoid that. So on the top one we've got now, as you can see, I'm going to give it a go with a gun. Nope, it doesn't want to have any of it, doesn't want to know. So I'm going to have to get the grips in there and undo it that way. Why is it tricky on the 206, I hear you cry? The reason being is the access behind here isn't very much. I can only just get my fingers behind there, so to get a big pair of grips isn't going to happen. So I have a smaller pair of grips that hopefully I can get behind there. So the grips are just behind, onto the joint. Give it a squeeze. I'm going to check the spanner, see if it will still turn. There we go. So I could obviously just continue now with the spanner, and that might be what you need to do. Just keep turning until it comes off. Cheat mode. So there you can see the grips holding the joint through the rubber. So you could take a knot off there. So new one. Always like shiny parts. So there's your new one. These are pretty inexpensive. They're probably about a tenner each from a Motor Factors. You probably even get 2 for 15 quid on eBay if you're being tight, which usually I am. So obviously you need to take the nuts off either end. They usually come with nice new nuts. Make sure that if they you haven't got new ones, so that if the old ones are reusable, the nylock in the centre is good, because that's what holds these nuts on. So I'm just going to do it in reverse order. Get through the middle there. Put a nut on. Now because the joint is good, we can just literally just do it up. The joint won't spin. And if it does begin to spin, you just put your Allen key in the centre there, like that, and do it up like that. As it happens, these Allen key ones are bigger on the new one, which is useful because it's less likely to round off. I'm going to use cheat mode, but I'm going to turn the gun down just to nip it up. And then I'm going to finish off by hand. So it's not that tight, but they need to be. There we go. As tight as you can probably get it with just your average spanner is more than enough.
So we're back underneath the car, and now the aeroplane's passed over. We either have aeroplanes or trains, just as I'm doing filming. Just like with removal, you need to put the bar in there. It can be any bar, bit of scaffold, whatever. And a bit of pressure on the anti-roll bar. Some will have more tension on it than others, depends how you jacked your vehicle up. And then might have to move the joint a little bit just to line it up. And slot it through. There we go. And we're going to put our nut on there just by keeping a little bit more tension still on the anti-roll bar. And the nut's on. Again, I am going to cheat a little bit for the sake of speed. Just going to buzz that on with the gun. Actually, you know what, for your sake, I'll do it by hand. But I'll speed the bit of video up. There we go. And that's done. It's tight. Thanks for watching. I hope that's been helpful. If it saved you a few quid, then my job's done here. If you've learnt a few things too, that is probably also partly the purpose of this channel. Please like it, please look up my Facebook page, and if you would share my channel with your friends, that's the biggest way you can help my channel. Look out for the Patreon page soon, and that's it. I'm out. Oink oink.